In Central Asia, the lifeblood for millions of people has always flowed from one source, the magnificent glaciers of the Pamir and Tian Shan Mountains. For generations, these were a steady, reliable source of water. But that's changing. These immense frozen reservoirs are melting, and they're melting fast. And that has started a countdown. You see, this isn't just a story about climate change. It's a story about a looming water crisis, one that's being supercharged by geopolitics, huge engineering projects, and the ghosts of ecological disasters past.
Okay, just think about this for a second. Imagine it's the year 2050. A strategic analysis looks back and describes Central Asia, not in terms of peace or cooperation, but in terms of acute, technology-driven hydro conflict. And no, this isn't some science fiction movie plot. This is a very real projection of where the region is heading if things don't change. A future where water isn't shared, but is fought over.
So that's the big question we're trying to answer here. How does a region's most vital resource, the very thing that gives it life, become a potential trigger for war? Well, to understand that possible future, we have to unravel all the different threads that are weaving together right now. The melting mountains, raw political ambition, and a dying sea.
So let's start at the very source of it all, way up high in the mountains. Because that's where this crisis truly begins, with the slow, steady disappearance of the region's natural water towers.
The scientific term for all this is the cryosphere, basically the frozen parts of our planet. But in Central Asia, it really just comes down to the colossal glaciers of the Pamir and Tian Shan ranges. You can think of them like giant natural bank accounts for water. They store winter snow and then release it as meltwater during the hot, dry summers, feeding the two great rivers, the Amu Darya and the Sur Darya. For the 22 million people who live downstream, this isn't just interesting geography, it's their entire water supply. And when you look at the raw data, what's really alarming is the sheer speed of this change. We're not talking about slow geological time here. Between 1960 and 2020, the Tian Shan Range lost up to 30% of its glacial area. The Pamir's up to a quarter. And the scary part is, the decline is actually accelerating. By 2050, we're on track for a total reduction of nearly half the glacial area in some of these absolutely critical spots. The water towers are emptying out.
And if you look at the most severe, high-emission scenarios, well, the long-term forecast is just staggering. Some models are projecting that by the end of this century, certain areas could lose up to 81% of their total glacier area. That's not a change. That's a fundamental rewriting of the region's entire water system.
This whole situation leads to a really deceptive phenomenon called peak water. You see, as the glaciers melt faster and faster, they temporarily dump more water into the rivers. It creates this dangerous illusion that everything is fine, that there's plenty of water. But it's a trap. It's like your bank account suddenly getting bigger because you're cashing out all your retirement savings. It feels good for a minute, but once that peak is passed, the river flows are projected to go into a permanent steep nosedive, right at the same time that demand from growing populations is going up.
But the melting glaciers, that's just the foundation of the crisis. The real accelerant here is human intervention. And we can see this happening in real time with one single massive construction project that is literally redrawing the water map of Central Asia.
Say hello to the Qosh Tepa canal in Afghanistan. The numbers alone are just mind-boggling. 285 kilometers long, 100 meters wide. It's a colossal project designed to turn 500,000 hectares of desert into farmland. But here's the critical geopolitical context. Afghanistan, which sits at the headwaters of the Amu Darya River, was never part of the old Soviet-era treaties that have governed who gets how much water for decades. So now, they are staking their claim in a very big way.
And the potential impact is staggering. When it's fully up and running, this one canal could divert up to a third of the Amu Darya's entire flow. Now, if you're a downstream country like Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan, and your farms, your cities, your everything depends on that river, this isn't just a diversion, this is an existential threat.
This one canal has the power to take the timeline for a full-blown water crisis and just shrink it dramatically. It basically transforms the problem from a gradual climate-driven decline into an abrupt politically driven water shock. And that's going to have immediate economic and security ripple effects across the whole region.
Now, this region has seen before what happens when a river's flow gets choked off. To really understand the stakes of the Qosh Tepa Canal, all we have to do is look at Central Asia's most infamous ecological catastrophe. The story of the Aral Sea's collapse is just terrifyingly fast. I mean, in 1960, it was the fourth largest inland sea on the entire planet. But then, decades of Soviet-era water diversions for cotton farming basically starved it to death. By the year 2000, it had shrunk into a few toxic, super salty lakes. By 2014, its whole eastern basin was just gone. And by 2050, the projections show a 95% loss of its original water volume.
The result is one of the most haunting landscapes on Earth, a ship graveyard where massive fishing trawlers just sit and rust in the middle of a new desert, the Aral. But this isn't just a sad story from the past, it's a toxic legacy that is actively shaping the crisis today.
And this is where the past and the present collide in a truly devastating feedback loop. So storms pick up millions of tons of salt and pesticide-laced dust from the dry Aral seabed. This dark dust gets carried for hundreds of miles and then settles on the faraway glaciers of the Pamir and Tian Shan mountains. Because the dust is dark, it makes the glaciers absorb more sunlight, which in turn makes them melt even faster. So get this, the ghost of the Aral Sea is literally helping to kill the very glaciers that once fed it.
So what we have is melting glaciers, a massive new canal, and a toxic legacy all converging at the same time. This brings the nations of Central Asia to a really critical crossroads, with two very different futures ahead of them.
And the choice is pretty stark. On one side, you have a path of cooperation. Countries working together to develop big projects like the Kumbarata 1 hydropower dam, investing in modern, water-saving irrigation, and sharing data openly. On the other side, well, that's the path to conflict. That's where you see unilateral moves like the Qosh Tepa canal, countries sticking with leaky old Soviet-era infrastructure and treating water data like it's a state secret. Right now, the entire region is walking a tightrope between these two futures.
But there is a glimmer of hope. Look at Kazakhstan, a downstream nation that's taking really aggressive action. They're building dozens of new reservoirs, they're digitizing thousands of kilometers of canals to stop leaks and track every drop, and they're even leading efforts to partially revive the northern part of the Aral Sea. It's a great model of how proactive, tech-driven water management can actually make a difference. But the urgency here, you just can't overstate it. The chairman of the Eurasian Development Bank, a key financial player in the region, put it bluntly. He said, "We have only 5 years." That's the window he believes the region has to prepare and coordinate before severe shortages become totally unavoidable. Just 5 years.
And the human cost of getting this wrong is immense. The United Nations and the World Bank have warned that if coordinated action isn't taken, water stress and desertification could displace up to 5 million people in Central Asia by 2050. These are climate refugees in the making.
So, when we put it all together, the drivers of that potential 2050 conflict, they become crystal clear. You've got the cryosphere collapsing, which shrinks the total supply of water. You've got strategic diversions that turn a shared resource into a zero-sum game. You have past ecological catastrophes making the present crisis even worse. And the old diplomatic agreements are proving totally inadequate for this new reality.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty sobering question. The crisis in Central Asia is like a preview of a challenge the entire world is going to have to face as our climate changes. As the planet's great water towers, from the Himalayas to the Andes, all begin to melt, are we going to find new ways to cooperate and share what's left? Or is Central Asia's countdown to conflict just a preview of our own?